scale, we'll probably start around 6:10.
Good to see you. Yeah.
I can announce that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If anyone has questions that they'd like to ask, they can always sign up at that sheet over there that Ellie is holding. And the questions will just be asked in order of the names on the list.
I know it's amazing to think about.
Didn't you used to have a black Labrador? What's her name? I forget her name.
Which one?
This one with the sweater. Well, she used to work at.
Stacy.
Stacy used to work at the Ugly Mug, and it was the Ugly Mug way back.
Oh wow.
Before it was two
Center
things.
Street. Oh.
Across, there was another thing before that. That's the last thing it was. But she was definitely. We all were young at one time, I guess.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah. I know, I was like, it's fine. I brought my headphones.
What's the thunderstorm at age?
Oh.
I guess everybody else on there, so I guess it's.
Good evening. My name is Shoshana Wechter, and I'm a member of the League of Women Voters of the Ann Arbor area. I welcome you to tonight's forum featuring candidates for City Council in Ward 3. The candidates will be on the ballot in the November general election on Tuesday, November 6th. The League of Women Voters of the Ann Arbor area is pleased to be sponsoring these forums. The League is a nonpartisan grassroots organization that does not support candidates or parties, but we do take stands on issues that we have studied. One of the League's important goals is to assist voters in making informed choices at the polls, and thus we bring you tonight's program. Besides the candidates on the ballot this November, for example, school board, which we will be having a forum for 1 week from tonight here, there will also be ballot questions. Statewide ballot questions will be covered at What's on Your Ballot sessions. There's one on the 11th, tomorrow evening, in the Whitaker Road Library Community Room, and one next Monday, the 15th, here at the Riverside Arts Center. Additionally, we have reached out for informational literature about the local ballot questions, and you can find information about those questions from the county parks, the schools, and the library over there in that corner. Volunteers from the League of Women Voters are managing tonight's forum. Our moderator is Roberta Wojcik-Andrews, who will explain the process from here.
Welcome, everybody. Each candidate will have 3 minutes to introduce themselves. After introductions, I, as the moderator, will ask the candidates a series of questions that have been developed by the League of Women Voters. Each candidate will have an opportunity to answer the questions, each given 2 minutes for an answer. The order of candidates will rotate back and forth, since we have 2 tonight, in order to give each candidate a chance to answer first or last. After League questions, there will be a chance for audience questions. If you wish to ask a question, please sign up on our sign-up sheet at the back of the room. And we will call, Shoshana will call you in order after the prepared questions are done. You will have 1 minute to pose a question. Please ask only one question and direct your questions in general to both the candidates rather than calling on one of the candidates. Be respectful and don't expect to respond to what they're saying. It's not a debate tonight. It's just a forum where they will answer your question. And also, you'll be coming up to the microphone here, and there are people behind you, so please, once you ask your question, step aside so that the people behind you can see. After those questions, the candidates will have 2 minutes for closing statements, and in order to make sure we give the most amount of time to the candidates and questions, please save applause until the end of the forum. And with that, we will start with opening statements, and we will start with Anthony Morgan.
Welcome. Thank you. Thank you for taking the time out your busy schedules to come here on this Wednesday night to check out the candidates here for Ypsilanti Ward 3. I want to say thank you to the families that I had the opportunity to serve. I want to say thank you to the school systems. I want to say thank you to the communities that have embraced me over the time. I want to thank you for the opportunity to hopefully represent you as I've been representing individuals and small groups and organizations throughout the last 20 years here in Ypsi. I want to say thank you to my family. The opportunity for an ordinary citizen to serve on city council was a major one, and although we're just ordinary people, we get an opportunity to do extraordinary things given the support. Why I've decided to run, I didn't just wake up one morning and thought that I should do it. The process was me asking 100 of my friends, my colleagues, and some people a little further out the circle if they thought I would be a credible, qualified candidate. And with the overwhelming response that I had, I felt it was a responsibility to serve. I could have just sat on that and just had some kudos, but I removed my ego and thought it was much more to be done. I'm doing this for the students who have the intelligence and the drive but don't have the support and the resources to match their ambitions. I'm doing this for the families with the work ethics and the credit scores but They can't find realtors to match their suitable, accessible housing needs. The format in which I'm using is called YES, Youth, Environment, and Safety. That's the structure in which I will be posing Ypsilanti 2034, which is a culmination of visionary plans and sensible initiatives that can be formulated into people-driven policy. I know how to pay for things will always be something that will always come up when in city council or when in the board of dealing with people and development. So identifying tax basis and small businesses and businesses that would like to support. I've been in the education field, social justice, coaching. I've been a parent. I've been a mentor of hundreds of young men. And so the reason I'm here is to learn from the social, political lessons that I've learned over the last year, to identify some of the needs and some of the solutions that can help move Ypsilanti further. And lastly, I wanted you all to know that there is a better Ypsilanti possible. We've had some mismanagement and things. However, I'm not here to focus on the negative. I'm here to let you guys know that I'm available, accessible, and flexible. I think things that are necessary for City Council. So I just want to say thank you, and I'm glad you're here.
Desiraé?
Hello, good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out, and thank you for all of those who are watching on the live stream. So I guess I'll start off by just talking a little bit about the questions that come up from folks right away, which is about why I ran and why I decided to run as a nonpartisan candidate. One thing is, during the most recent presidential election, one of the things for me that I really took from that is how important local governance can be in terms of mobilizing people in communities, thinking about issues that impact people every day, thinking about where do we actually learn about taxes, how our taxes go. I didn't learn that in school, but it's something that impacts all of us every day. And now that I've been involved in going to city council, I can really see what that looks like, how that matters, and wanting to be a person to help open up some of that for others who sometimes are shut out of the process. Also, I was asked by people, I've been lucky to get to know folks who've been longtime Ypsilanti residents, lifelong Ypsilanti residents, new Ypsilanti residents. And many of them have seen the work that I've done or gotten to know me just from me diving into the community here and asked me to run. And so that was something that was really humbling, actually, to think about a person like myself who's been here for about 4 years and thinking about taking a step in leadership and how proud I am that people trust what happens in the city to me. As a person who's been here for 4 years, I've been lucky to live in multiple areas of this country, multiple regions of the country. And so I've learned a lot about things that work well in different kind of spaces, things that don't really work well, how to really get a sense of the energy and the hopes of people and how to put it into practice in different ways. And so I'm really looking to bring that, my perspective to council and to think about how we can really think about dealing with the challenges that we have in front of us and being able to get to the things that we most want to see within our community.
Thank you. Okay, Desiraé Simmons will have the first response to the first question. Do you think that the city should change the way it communicates with residents about news regarding city services and other information that affects residents' daily lives, and if so, how?
So this is an interesting question for me. My academic background is in communication, so I study public relations and marketing communications in school and got a master's in communications management. So when I moved here, that was one of the things I noticed right off the bat. In fact, not only in terms of thinking about the different news options that we have here, but also thinking about, you know, if I were just a everyday resident that wasn't as outspoken as I am, how would I have found out information? How would I know that there's information for me to pay attention to? And I said to my husband, I was like, they need a communications person, not only to think about getting information out to folks before the decisions are made, which I think is something that's really important, but also in terms of thinking about how do we actually get feedback back from people? How do we share really great stories that are happening in other places that might be relevant to us here? And so I would really look to do that. As I've been talking to folks at the door, I've been asking them, well, how do you want to get information? Some people say through email, some people say through meetings, some people say through social media. And I think we should do any and all the things that we need to. We also need to have more public spaces to post information. That's something we don't have right now. In fact, we have an ordinance that says we can't post on lamp posts around the city because there's supposed to be kiosks, and we don't have those. So we need to think about in every and all ways of communication and figure out how people want the information they need.
Anthony? Oh, boy. Do you think that the city should change the way it communicates with its residents about news regarding city services and other information that affects the residents' daily lives? And if so, how?
Thank you. That's a great question. In this past year, I've been at about 62 meetings and met with hundreds of citizens. And I think after doing stakeholder analysis, where you can wonder how people, the communication goals, the contact frequency, the contact methods, and how people want to be contacted. And it's different from emails to Facebook. You got social media, you have letters, you have digital formats. And personally, this is no disrespect to any person, not just the information that's being shared with daily lives. I know Pete Murdoch is a wealth of information. Mark, Peter, Brian Robb, Steve Pierce. These are lenses in which information gets pushed out. I remember when we used to have an Ypsilanti Heritage newspaper. So it's like we have certain lenses that dominate what things go on within the city in the perspective of that. So I think like the Ypsilanti Library has a bus that takes routes for people who can't get to the library, so they actually go out into the communities and share their information. Just like if we needed seniors to get help with voting or get help with medical supplies, we can actually bring it to them. So information has to be taken to people sometimes in the format that's best digested for them. And I think having satellite, like the city council can have a satellite bus or a car to actually go to certain neighborhoods and be more visible. I think that makes people more welcome to the information that's being shared.
Okay, thank you. The next question will start with Anthony Morgan. The course of development and affordable housing has been a growing concern for some residents in the city of Ypsilanti. What would you do to move development in a direction that matches your goals and dreams for Ypsilanti?
That's an amazing question, because it's been on the forefront of everybody's mind. And just to be really clear, when we're talking about affordable housing in Ann Arbor is much different than affordable housing here in Ypsi. And I understand how Ypsilanti is affected by the housing market in Ypsilanti. I've spent in my family, I probably paid $700 a month over the last 20 years as a renter. So I paid over $160,000 as a renter and can't find a house. Discrimination is illegal, unjust, and detrimental to the economic growth of the underserved communities in the U.S. and around the world. And I understand that here in Ypsilanti, we do have a housing problem. Some people have interests, some people have issues, some people have influence, and other people have investments. And I think it affects our housing market. Having the actual space, because here in Ypsilanti, I think 701 homes just went from MISHDA low-income property to fair market rates. So that's 701 homes that have just inflated the price. which is not helping the actual outcome of what they say they want for Ypsilanti. But just like the Nexus Pipeline, when you're thinking about development, sometimes the people could not want it. However, these are billions and billions of dollars that's going to push agendas forward. And so I have a plan and agenda to stop, at least we can thwart some of the investors that are looking to develop in urban settings for profit. And so I think it needs to be a group of people to get together for long-term solutions, especially for the housing on the south side of Ypsilanti.
Affordable housing. Yes, this is about affordable housing. And so this is something that anyone who kind of knows about my work, I think even tangentially knows that I've been doing a lot of work around affordable housing. I think a couple of things that as I'm talking to folks and hearing about some of the pushback or pull when people even hear that term, I think we need to recognize that affordability is an issue that impacts all of us. When we talk about changing over a population, that means you. That means all of us in our community here now, people who have been able to buy and afford a home here based on, maybe working for a union, maybe being a teacher, maybe being a faculty member at EMU, folks who moved here back in the 70s or 80s, folks who moved here in the early 2000s. All of us, many of us could not afford a lot of the prices that we're looking at now. This is for homeowners, this is for renters. When we talk about a population change, this is all of us. So we need to look at opportunities and policies that help us to maintain affordability for those of us who are here, who are invested in the Ypsilanti community, and listening to each other's stories and figuring out how do we get to those next stage options that don't shut the door and push out those of us who wouldn't be able to afford big changes.
Okay. Desiraé Simmons starts this time. Police oversight has been an extremely important issue all over the United States, gaining much more attention over the last 5 years, especially because of the work groups like Black Lives Matter. What would you like to see in the city of Ypsilanti in terms of police oversight, and what do you think the right steps are to take?
So there's been a lot of work right now going on with Transforming Justice Washtenaw. They actually have just been organizing in Ann Arbor around police oversight, and I've been able to go to a couple of those meetings to learn about what's happening there, what are some of the challenges, and what does this look like here in Ypsilanti, especially because we just we have a newly formed commission that's working a police I don't want to say police oversight, police advisory commission. So it's really important to think about, for me, what does the success of the police look like? How are we measuring the success? How do we think about what as a community we like to see? We automatically think about safety, and I wonder, well, what does safety look like? And do we feel more safe based on what is happening within the police department and out on the streets and in the communities of Ypsilanti? Do we feel more safe? Do we feel that the violent crimes that are happening, do we feel like there's an appropriate response to those things? So I have some questions about that and how we measure that success, and how do we think about what we would like to see as a community, and how do we educate folks on that, right? In terms of what's appropriate need for the police, when do we need to call the police, when are there other options that don't need to get the police involved? What are things that we can do as a community to help ourselves be more safe? And, one of the things I was thinking about is it's a lot of eyes on streets, eyes on houses, eyes on the community, knowing where people are. And there's examples that we're seeing within neighborhood associations where they're helping us to do that. And so I think learning from some of those ways too is important.
I was involved at Eastern Michigan with the COPAC trainings that the Washington Sheriff's Office was holding, a lot of workshops about police and community engagement. And when you think about advisory, it's like giving advice. When you think about oversight, that means you have some say. But we need to learn how to constitutionalize some of these documents that we're talking about when dealing with the police, because the Michigan Constitution says that all political power is inherently in the people and is instituted for their equal benefit, security, and protection. And I would like to decrease the need for police and increase the capacities of the communities. I think when we look for police to solve our problems, we will continue to do that. And when I'm a co-founder of Radical Washtenaw, and when we were in the streets, and Keep Ypsi Black was a spawn or different commissions and groups and meetings, but when we were in the streets, we were literally attempting to push agendas of the people, the common people. And the thing about safety and security, most people, because we're a gun country, we're a gun nation, so most people believe that calling on people with guns is the way to solve community issues. I think they did have the interrupters out for a while, that were in the streets agitating things also. So I think constitutionalize some of these agreements, making them binding, decreasing police. We have 5 law enforcement agencies that surround this 4.3 mile area. And so you see a cop once every 8 to 9 minutes here in Ypsilanti City. And so I believe that decreasing their presence and decreasing their resources while maintaining the integrity of why they're here.
Okay, Anthony Morgan, you are first in the next question. Parts of Grove Street and Park Street were recently closed, the reason given being to hasten the development of a passenger train station. In 2016, the RTA funding issue failed at the ballot. Earlier this year, the RTA made a decision not to put funding for comprehensive regional services on the ballot this fall, seeing a lack of support from leadership in Oakland and Macomb counties. What do you see as the future of a rail stop in Ypsilanti?
Thank you for the question. This is a very short question. I'm from Detroit. I think Ford killed the mass transit bill many, many times over. I think cities that are looking to move forward to the future need some type of mass transit to move money in and out of the city. How that looks and some of the things that are on the table, I think it takes thoughtful, forward-thinking people. Is this the same issue where they built the ramp? I was listening last night as far as when things come through Depot Town. I know Depot Town is a major stop, a major hub between Ann Arbor and Ypsilanti. I do think with the transit, we need mass transit here to move money back and forth. I think if I was elected, I could sit down with some thoughtful organizations and people much smarter than me to find some credible ways to do so.
Public transportation is important to me because I rely on it. So I never learned to drive, which apparently when I moved here and was looking for a house, I was told that we make cars and drive them in Michigan. So I realized that this is one of my number one outsider status moments, is that I don't drive. So public transportation is important. And when I came and I realized I couldn't get to Detroit without being able to drive, I was like, oh no. That wasn't what I expected. So I think in terms of thinking about the rail and what that looks like, I am really interested in what conversations look like between Washtenaw and Wayne County, which were the 2 areas where it did pass, and whether there's any movement forward that would allow us to move forward with some plans that might allow for Macomb and Oakland to join on later, and or to figure out, well, what is holding things up? So here I've met a lot of Oakland County folks in Ypsilanti, and I've asked them about this question because, you know, I don't live there, so I don't really know. And I've asked them, well, what do you think about this? And they've said, well, we are a little disappointed that the conversations didn't go far, and that sometimes it comes down to the leadership and who's at the table. And this just tells me that maybe more conversations need to be had with the people there, and whether there's pressure that they can put on their elected officials to push forward some ideas for funding. But I think this is something we need to figure out. We've made some investments as a city, and we need to figure out before we do any more investments whether this is realistic for us or not, and what we need to do and what we can do to push forward any plans for better public transportation.
Thank you. Desiraé, you go first. Many communities in Michigan suffer from poor road condition, be it from underfunding, extreme weather, heavy truck traffic, or a combination of the three. What is your plan to help improve the roads in the city of Ypsilanti?
So this is interesting. I mean, there's the roads that we as a city have control over and the roads that the state have control over. And I'm really interested. One of the things that I would look for is a map, like, which roads are which, and how do we think about creating a plan for first thinking about the roads that the city has some control over, in terms of first thinking, people who use the roads know which ones are the worst. I would like to ask folks, well, which ones are the worst for you? How do we prioritize where we need to put our resources first? And then think about, as a body, how do we prioritize and think about how we can see the funds that we gather from folks in reality. So maybe we can't, pave a new road every year, but what is our plan for paving those roads? How do we share that with the community so that they know when to expect some visible progress on the roads, and doing the ones where we know they're worst first. And I think that there's definitely spaces in the budget for us to do some of that, because it's something that's really important to people.
I live on River Street. I drove my car to West Virginia last weekend, but then I came back to Ypsilanti and I realized I was on the roads. My car reminded me that I was on Ypsilanti streets. The street on Cross Street between River Street and Prospect is horrible. River Street between Michigan Avenue and Cross Street is horrible, and I can see the deep holes in I think identifying issues is one thing, but actually having the resources and the manpower to fulfill those needs is a totally different conversation. Insurance, I can see why insurances are so high, because my car just got beat up for driving 3 miles in Ypsi versus 800 miles across the country. I think finding a way to pay for the roads that we need, there's no question that the streets in Ypsilanti can use a little more care. We do have, and anything that needs to be paid for, it does need a tax base. It does need a business, a large business, and maybe small and middle businesses to support it. But then we do have some dispensaries here that got tons of cash. I won't point fingers or anything, but it's a lot of, and we have advanced solar technology here. We have some resources here that we can ledger to create a bank or a base of money to be able to at least start the process. It's a wonderful city here. Don't mess your cars up.
Okay, Anthony, you're first on the next question. What can the city do or continue to do to make the city of Ypsilanti an attractive and supportive place for the LBGT community?
You may not want to hear what I'm going to say, but I'm going to say it. I believe everybody should love who they want to love. We have a mayor, and we have a city manager, and we have someone on city council right now that identifies. So I think we're doing great strides to highlight that population. And having Ypsi Pride Days. Thank you.
I think that based on a lot of folks that I know in the community, LGBTQ folks who have families here, folks who have a spouse or a partner, or folks who are single living in Ypsilanti. I think that a lot of them feel really great here, feel really welcome, feel that we are a community that does not discriminate. We have a lot of business owners who are LGBTQ population, and I think it's really great that we have the community and that we have a lot of social infrastructure. We have a lot of events that are very open. I was really excited when we had the change, the change of the name from for Ypsi Proud, and being able to have Pride Day down on Washington Street, and I've been able to participate in those as a peacekeeper for the past couple of years that we've had that there. And so I think that we're doing a lot of great work just by having folks in leadership and people who are vocal in the community to be able to share both what they need and also the ways that they best like to contribute and celebrate here too.
Thank you. And Desiraé, you're first on the next question. Ypsilanti has been a city that has embraced recycling for a while now. Recently, the city closed the recycling center on Rice Street. What do you see as the future of recycling in the city of Ypsilanti?
So I think recycling is really important. I remember having a conversation with my current council member, Pete Murdoch, about recycling, and learned a little bit about the history and kind of how it started as a kind of residents kind of banding together to provide recycling, and then how it grew. And I think that it's really important to have really strong recycling programs. It's too bad that we don't yet provide it to everyone who's a resident here, including those who live in apartments with 4 or more units in them. I think that's something we should definitely do. I also think that we need to think about what comes before recycling. So how do we reduce waste, and then how do we reuse waste, and how do we partner with businesses and our schools to do so? Something that I've brought up to council and also spoke about at the Sustainability Commission just last week, is around thinking about styrofoam use. So this is something that with the closing of the recycling center, we no longer have a place to recycle styrofoam. And we have many, I'm eating out a lot as I'm running for city council, so I get a lot more styrofoam than I used to. But maybe there's ways that we can have incentive programs, much like when folks were using less plastic bags and making transitions to using reusable bags. Are there ways that we can have incentives for people to bring their own containers? So it's a way of also being a way to kind of reward people who come to your establishment on a regular basis, or people who are local. So I'm interested in thinking about ways of doing some of that, reducing and reusing, so that we actually have less to recycle overall.
Thank you. That was a great question. I'm all for waste elimination and waste reduction. I think citywide initiatives are necessary. And I know that to close the recycling plant over here in Depot Town was something that's been talked about for some time. There has been a grant that was given to Rutherford Pool for $300,000 with the in that language that the recycling place be closed. I think that's what sped up the process, even though it's been talked about for years and years. So incentivizing people to close it. I mean, well, like the Yucca, the utilities place is operated by Ypsilanti Township, but Ypsilanti and Superior Township shares that. So I think using some of those structures for recycling may be in the works, where we don't have a recycling place as it is now. So we may have to share space with Ypsi Township and maybe even Superior Township while we develop a plan to make it better for everyone in the city.
Okay, and Anthony Morgan, you are first to the next question. A few months ago, the revelation regarding a revelation regarding the past activity of a candidate impacted the primaries and that person's candidacy. Do any candidates here tonight have criminal records that have not been publicly disclosed?
I would like to think the way I've been despised at some points in Ypsilanti, that had I had a criminal record, some of you would have been the first to throw it in my face. I've been arrested, being forced into a drug ring as a 13-year-old in Detroit, where I was arrested for 44 days, and I've been arrested outside here on Michigan Avenue doing some social justice work by the Ypsilanti Police Department.
No.
More time for audience questions later. Okay, so we start with Desiraé in the next question. City residents currently pay over 8 mils of property tax just to cover the shortfalls in police and fire pension and retiree health care funds. This liability is growing. The millage is over 4 times what it was before 2005. How would you address this?
So on this question, I think for me, this is one space where I feel like I need much more information in terms of what some of the numbers look like, what is it projected to grow into, why is it growing, if it's mainly just because of the numbers, how it's ballooning, how we've been dealing with it so far, which it sounds like adding more and more mills to our property tax. But in terms of thinking about how it move forward with that, I feel like I need a little bit more information in terms of what some of those specific numbers look like. In general, I think that we need to, when thinking about our budget, our budgetary responsibilities, that we cannot shortchange people as they retire. We cannot shortchange people who have who retired with a certain expectation of what we would provide. So I think we need to think about what those responsibilities are, and then as we move forward, thinking about what are our contracts look like going forward, and making some of those hard decisions, which obviously no one wants to have to do. But I know that being on city council is not always about rainbows and sunshine. Sometimes it's actually putting our wheels to the ground and doing some of that hard work.
I think with the mill increase, I'm gaining more understanding on how the mills is set, and I know the school board, I believe, sets the mill prices. Now, no, renters pay a different amount with the city and state tax versus the homeowners paying just the city tax, I believe, or just the state tax. Somebody's going to quote me on this and get back to me if I'm incorrect. Later, Peter, later. So I think finding a credible way to take the burden off homeowners in certain districts where school boards set the mill price, and I'm finding out where the strain is coming from. I don't know if it's on the renter base or the homeowner base or the people with excessive property. I don't know if we're all taxed the same. So I'm definitely looking forward to get more information on how the mill is expanding and continue to grow, and whose specific shoulders is it falling on, and how is it being divided between the renters and the homeowners.
Thank you. And Anthony, you are first on the next question. The city of Ypsilanti recently passed a community benefits ordinance. How do you think the CBO will affect the future of Ypsilanti?
Thank you for that question. And CBOs are merely citizens getting together with developers, using public money to fund private projects. And in Philadelphia and Detroit, there had CBOs, and the three main things that were the issue with CBOs is that they weren't transparent enough, they weren't legally binding, and the process was a difficult process. And they passed. It was 2 CBOs, Proposal A, which was a very strong language by the community, and it was a Part B that the developers was a weak version, and the weak version passed, and people just had to accept it. I would hate for the same thing to happen in Ypsilanti, where we're sitting there, and it took 3 years to do that, and it took longer in other cities. So just because people are at the table, and just because a deal gets done, does not mean it's a good deal. I know people want leverage. People want input. They want to feel like the concerns are being heard beyond just sitting at the table. So I think a community benefits ordinance, and you got to think about the PLA, the licenses agreements between those who are doing the work. So I haven't seen a CBO that was true to its intended purpose based on the views of the community as of yet. And once I get my eyes on one, I would bring it forward to Ypsilanti City Council.
So I'm a founding member of Rising for Economic Democracy in Ypsi, which is a coalition group that really took on as a project working with City Council to draft and pass the Community Benefits Ordinance. And so I know that I am I had to have a different perspective on it from that space. I think that there are, we really look to Detroit. So Detroit's the only other city that has a Community Benefits Ordinance. So we took a lot of leadership from them. And really also looking at some of the things that are some of the shortfalls of what their ordinance was and how we could add some more strength to what we were doing here in Ypsilanti. We also know that by us passing a CBO, that now opens up possibilities for other areas, for other cities who are facing similar challenges to us, where we know that the community values our Ypsilanti, the people here, our assets, the river, in particular, is one space, and we want to make sure that we're not giving it away to folks who are not invested in the community, that are not invested in the people here. The people here know what we need, and so being able to have that even just a process, I think, will take us a lot further, and then we'll see what else we need to do to help strengthen that and to build in more accountability, which happens when there is an actual development in the conversation that the community members have with the developer. So I have a lot of hopes for where this can take us, and I'm glad that we're at the forefront of pushing a participatory process and valuing the assets of community that we have here at Ypsilanti.
You were second already? Okay, we're done?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Can we do one more? I think okay. I missed this one, so I think being that people will want to know your views on it, we start with Desiraé. What do you see as the path forward for Water Street? And we'll end with.
Last night we had some folks singing songs, trying to make this sound a lot better than it is. But I actually am really excited about the possibilities for Water Street. I haven't had to live through some of the a lot of the hardest conversations that have happened in the community for that. And so I think that gives me a space to be a little bit more optimistic. I do think that we need to, as a community, I know there's been some conversation about what we want there, but I think we need to actually put together a plan. One of the conversations I had with some city staff was that, they're open to ideas, and that really what we need to do is put together plans. They say, well, we've heard a lot of thoughts about Water Street, but we haven't seen a plan for Water Street. And so I would be interested in actually kind of finding folks who are interested in putting together a plan and working with them and figuring out, well, what does that look like? I know one of the mayoral candidates has talked about wanting to focus on remediation first so that we can deal with the biggest problem, which in terms of selling that property and being able to get all that we would want and need from it because it's such a big expense. So that's something that's definitely interesting to me to explore and to see what that would look like. Also, I think in terms of thinking about what kind of developments we want to go after, I think that we as a community can decide what are some of the things we want to see there. There are also opportunities of folks that are looking. I know, as an example, there was one of the schemes that the AATA put forward for their new center that was based on Water Street. I know that there's been other conversations as folks have looked at that space, for instance, a skate park and things of that. So I think that there's some opportunities that we should best to look for how we best leverage the resources that we have to get the most out of a riverfront property.
If you guys can imagine 20 years back, they've been talking about this same thing. So that means you have to be able to imagine 15 years ahead. You got to be able to dream. You have to be able to see a vision. And I don't know what our identity is as Ypsilanti and what our purpose is. By 2025, I see a hotel concert house, a 90-room, 10-suite concert house off the river built up so we can house people when they come in, have a revenue stream, and have a structure that brings in money while making the other half a parking lot. And before we laugh at that, we have to have a vision beyond the 20 years of just talking about something that we never broke ground on. And when you look at the city council, these are individuals who get together and make choices and decisions for people like you. And before we start, I had to check myself before I started bashing the process. Before I had to look at what they had at their disposal. I had to look at what they had, the time and the climate. And I know we are right now literally paying for something that happened 20 years ago. So that means we need a vision to be able to invest in for something 15 years down the road, especially if you're a homeowner. So I do see a hotel concert house where there are people there on the river. We can create a space where there's music blaring, where there's people looking out the windows, where we can have a space that looks identifiable, that looks quality, that looks inclusive and welcoming. I appreciate Ypsilanti more and more when I come back to it. It's a very special place, and I do think that's a stain on the heritage of Ypsilanti when it looks like the lack of, and not to mention, much of that couldn't have got done had many more people been involved.
Okay, we're now ready for audience questions. And please come up to the microphone here, ask your question, and then step aside. You have 1 minute.
So the first question is from Mark Hergat.
And we'll start with Anthony Morgan on this question.
Ypsilanti has always been black, from the Underground Railroad to the first speeches by Frederick Douglass in buildings that still stand, to Elijah McCoy's workshop, to the civil rights work that was coordinated here in the 60s. Ypsilanti has always been black. And in the next 10 to 15 years, it might not be black anymore. How will you, as a council member, protect over 150 years of continuous cultural heritage for the next 150 years? Thank you.
Thank you for that question, Mark. Before I answer that question, I want to go back to 1893. Then I want to fast forward to 1980. Then I want to mention names like Gaulis or Tim McDonald or Filipiak or Agadanowski or Jay Donnelly or Pete Murdoch or Tyler Weston or Mike Eller. I want to mention these names that have a historical perspective also on one side of the region in Ward 3. So when you think about the other side of the tracks on the south side, where you think about historically black, and Arbor on Pontiac Trail has dedicated a home to the preservation, if you will, of black culture and black history. I drove up to Idlewild, which is the oldest settlement for since 1917 for blacks in the nation, and that's being gentrified. So it's some systems out here and operating procedures that want things a certain way. So when you ask an individual what he would do as a city council person beyond, and I do believe in self-determination for any group or people, or any race or ethnicity, the goal is we got to keep, and having black then more than just a novelty. To say that it's a novelty, just to have a black neighborhood is not enough. But when you look at it, that neighborhood's been poor since 30 years ago, and it's still poor. So just because you have it, that's one thing. But are we going to equitably make it seem precious and inviting? So just to have it is not enough. And if you look on the south side, what could we have done in the last 10 years to make it better, as opposed to what we're going to do in the next 10 years to make it more gentrified?
So Ward 3 is really interesting in general. I think that as a ward, we have all of the diversity that is Ypsilanti within our borders. And so I think it actually makes us a leader in terms of thinking about how to be more equitable and how do we look out for the needs of all of the residents, even if some things might not line people's pockets more, but that they're about lining their communities with the type of people that have built the community in the way that it is now. One of the people who endorsed me, Matt Siegfried, is one of the folks that does a lot of the historical tours, and that's been really great for me to learn more about Ypsilanti and the activists past and the black leaders in particular who have contributed to that. And also remembering it's not just about being black Ypsilanti, but being about working class black Ypsilanti. And so for me, it's thinking about how do we, so I was having a conversation with Matt, and he was saying, he's like, black Ypsilanti's gone. And I was like, stop being so depressing, Matt. But that's just, if you know anything, if you met him, you know, that's just his kind of way, his manner. And so I asked him, well, what could we do? Like, if from your perspective, what could we do? And he said, well, it's gone. But if we were going to do something, we need to think about, we need to really stop gentrification from happening. We need to think about what's happening displacement-wise. We need to think about our policies, stop having policies that put public goods into private hands. And we need to better connect with West Willow, which through our school district, we are connected with West Willow. So I would do things to try to push those things forward, because I think it's important that we maintain a strong black class here in Ypsilanti.
And you are, Desiraé, you are first with the next question.
The next question is from John McMullen.
John McMillan, 504 North Huron Street. The question's for both of you. Now that the city-owned building is in Depot Town and we're doing open events, we have an interest on what we're going to do with parking. We have over 350 employees right now that need to park. There's 200 more coming in the new building. And these weekends now, with weddings and that going on, is shutting down Depot Town. And it's time. Somebody's got to make a decision that we have to have some parking, or we have to make some changes. So my question is, what can you do to help us?
Well, I'm interested in knowing, but I know this isn't a talk back. I'm like, well, by what changes, what kind of things would that look like? Parking is definitely a big challenge. Here, I know that I've heard about how with the Freight House opening for events, that there were some concerns from some of the business owners in Depot Town that didn't expect for it to be weddings and things every weekend, that it might be more local events and things of that sort. And I know there's also the kind of pull of thinking about how the Freight House keeps their doors open and makes money too, so that this is one of those ways that can happen. So it's an interesting tension. When thinking about parking too, it's not so easy to just say, let's put up a parking structure, and not that that's necessarily what people would like to see. A lot of folks I know talk about not feeling safe in parking structures. So what are examples? What are things that we need to do here? Where do we look for and identify areas where we have parking? I know at City Council, there's lots of conversations about spots, like how many spots can we paint if we actually pave the parking lots to be the most efficient? Where do we find spots? How do we look at folks who have own private parking that would then let the city lease from them or provide parking, paid parking downtown? What does that look like? I know people have talked about just like throwing gravel and having people park at Water Street, right? So there's lots of thoughts about this. I think that we need to develop a short and long-term solution for parking, thinking about what are the parking needs going to look like in 20 years, and that way and invest accordingly.
Thank you for that question. I know people who ride the bus and walk don't really care about parking spaces. However, people who have businesses and have interests do. I do think EMU, as it stands, being a tax-free entity, has a lot of parking. And I don't know how we can reallocate some of their parking. Know how we can reallocate their parking, at least some of it. But I think the parking survey needs to happen to determine how many businesses have parking and what the need is. Because downtown, I rode around downtown a lot of times and haven't been able to find a parking space. So I live on River, so I walk most places. But I do know parking, when we have, I think that's a misuse of parking when you have outside people spending money to have events and then the people who live and work here can't park. I think that is an issue. But the bigger issue is identifying viable spaces that we can build structures on or build into the ground. Again, I think when people talk to city council, you forget it's a body of people with different thoughts and feelings about one particular issue. I don't know how many parking spaces are in Depot Town, but it's really never, ever enough. And I know once the recycling place moves right around your area, that can be a space that can be utilized for more parking on the short term. But the long term, I think a parking survey needs to take place to determine how many residents are driving versus people driving in to work here in Ypsilanti versus how many parking spaces are available when everybody from Ypsi goes to work in Ann Arbor. So I just think a parking survey needs to happen and the businesses can give much more input.
Okay, next question. We'll start with Anthony. Next question, we'll start with Anthony Morgan.
So we don't have any more
Oh,
names on
okay.
the list, but if anyone didn't get an opportunity, do you want to?
I've been drinking water the whole time. You can
Do-
this, right?
Sure. Let's do a bathroom break and then
Take a few minute break.
Yeah. And then afterwards, if more people have questions. Yeah, it's like a little.
Right. If not, they can do closing.
Okay, the next question is from Pete Murdoch.
And I,
Recently, the city sold 220 North Park, the old Boys and Girls Club, to a developer. And sometime later on this year, the first of the year, are going to come back with exactly what they're proposing. They were a little vague. Do you have any thoughts on what should happen there, or what the process should be?
this question should start with Anthony Morgan.
Thanks, Pete. And I'll be the first to tell you that Pete is a walking griot. I think he has more information about Ypsilanti than most people. I think I remember when it was a boys' club, when people were over there. I think Ypsilanti needs a skating rink. I just think it needs to be to me personally, I think it's an intimate skating rink where there is people who can use what you call those roller skates at the top and maybe roller blades at the bottom. I think it will attract people of all ages, economic backgrounds, because I think it's a fun, inviting, safe. And I don't know how long when a city sells a property, I don't know how long it takes for them to come back with a proposal for what's being built. But it seems like it took about a year, and in that time, it should be something formidable brought to the table. However, whatever it is, it should be revenue generating. It should be safe and accessible for families, and it should be used for everyone within the city. And I like to skate, and I think people using it in the winter or outside, they can make an ice skate. So there's 3 different types of ice skating, and I think you will find somebody in this room that does one of those. And I think, for me personally, I think that'd be a credible venture.
So earlier today, I was just going back through my notes, and I was actually looking at from a work session back last December around 220 Park. And it was interesting because a lot of council members were asking questions that are things that we address in the community benefits ordinance. And so hopefully for things going forward that we have some of those things in place. But with this property, I reached out to some of the folks, the neighbors in that area to ask about, well, what are some of your thoughts in terms of what you would like to see next? What is the process that you you envision? And I know that they were having a community meeting and were hoping to think about what they would do, if anything. So that's one thing for me, is I would first try to get a sense of what that looks like. But I also think that there's other folks that might also be interested, right? Like, this parcel of land is important to the whole city because it is a parcel of land that will be developed with housing. And if the housing is all luxury housing, which from some of the sounds of things that we're seeing, and in terms of some of the density that they're proposing, that there's a lot of questions for people who are in that community most adjacent, but then I think for the rest of Ypsilanti too. So we need to really watch this. The way the process currently goes, I feel that it's really easy for the community to not have the information that it needs in order to actually act. And I would like to see that changed. And I do think that this property would be a great space for us to look at things like a community land trust or cooperative housing or other ways to help to protect affordability for people there. Because even for folks in historic neighborhoods, a lot of them have said to me that they couldn't afford to pay the prices that they would need to pay now for those homes, and they wouldn't like to see something that drives up those prices more.
Are there any more questions?
The next question is from Joe Montgomery.
Desiraé Simmons, this will start with you.
Hi. So both candidates someone sent me this question to ask, so I wanted to ask it. Both candidates have talked about listening to people in the process of governance. If elected, how do you plan to listen to and incorporate different, diverse voices to inform your decision making?
Desiraé.
It's So that's an interesting question because part of it is about access and how you reach people in the different places that they are. So I'll talk about a few things that I've tried to do just in terms of the work I've been doing now. As an example, when International Village was up for council, I hosted just a neighborhood meeting at my house where I invited people in my network who might not have been already in the conversations, and people in my neighborhood, maybe with children who have a hard time going to council meetings. And I had them come over, and we just did information sharing, talked about what they knew, what they didn't know, and I shared information that I knew from going to council meetings. So I think that having this happen is really important and something that even within neighborhoods that people can do this more to help get people more information, but then also to help people to see how they can become engaged. Also, as I've been door knocking, sometimes just kind of being in spaces and going to people's doors and reaching them as they need to, and finding out what ways they can and want to be engaged. There's some people who might be able to do, meetings on a weekly basis, but there's some people who might be able to tune in maybe once a month and see like what is a scan of what's been happening, and where can I find more information, maybe in a electronic source, or point me to the place or the people who know. And I think helping people to use their networks more, I'm seeing this being a really big way of spreading information is just by personal network. So for us to identify different people in the community, in the neighborhoods that have their pulse on where people need information, and focusing our energies on that, and just making the process more open and transparent.
Thank you for that question, whoever sent it in. It's an anonymous thank you. I think we overuse that word, community. And you mentioned listening. I'll be honest, since November 2017, I listened to hundreds and hundreds of citizens. A lot of them don't know what they're talking about. A lot of them do. A lot of them have issues. Some people have influence. Again, some people have investments. And so when it comes to listening, I'm listening for the real issue. I'm listening for commonality. I'm listening for ways to work together collaboratively. So as I'm hearing, I didn't get here by talking. I got here by listening. But I do know people know what they want before they actually know how to achieve it. And so when you think about a population, we all are human, but within this population, we have specific communities within it, like an ecosystem. We have, fish, birds, and different things, and maybe not fish, they're in a different ecosystem. But when it comes to community, it's just differences, and our differences are specific. And so that is a diversity, and I think that's necessary. But when we're talking about multicultural, like last night I watched the mayor's debate, and I looked at the room. And look, this is not Ypsilanti. The last night was not a true representation of what Ypsilanti looked like. I was aware of the Asian Americans, where are the Arab Americans, where are the Latin Americans? So when you think about coming out in force, those who have investment seem to come out. Those are the ones we're hearing. And at City Council, the ones who come out the most are the ones who are heard the most, regardless if that's where the need is or not. So when we're thinking about listening is one thing, but getting people to the right places so they can literally and really be heard is the process.
Are there any more questions? Okay, so we are ready for closing statements, and Desiraé, you can start.
So one of the things when I first moved here, before I bought my house, a lot of folks told me a lot of negative things about Ypsilanti, and tried to tell me not to move here. But I knew better. The people I met and have associated with since being here know better. And so and when I go to city council meetings, a lot of folks are kind of really sad and despondent. And, a lot of people feel really sad about the state of things and kind of where do we go from here. So I see a lot of reasons for optimism. I see a lot of examples of community building. During this process, I've come across just different streets even holding just potlucks to build community and to think about where people are in their community and to help people feel welcome. And so I attended some of those with Dwight Street and the Lindsay Gardens. I see examples of community-driven action, like with the Ypsilanti Gathering Space, Ready with the CBO, the Citizen Subcommittee on Affordability and Accessibility that was actually proposed by the city's Planning Commission. And so a lot of these things are really dealing with big issues. I think that as I'm talking to folks, I'm hearing stories about why people vote, why people care, why people participate, what their ideas are when you ask them. And I think that we'll get to better solutions when we focus on those. I like to say, too, for myself, I am, people say about the outgoing council member that he's a numbers person. Well, I'm a numbers person, too. I'm a people's person. I'm an equity person. I'm a solutions person. And I'm a flawed person. And that will all go into the work that I do within City Council. But I'm here for the community. I'm here for you. And I hope that you will decide to vote for me on November 6th. Thank you.
Again, I want to thank you all for coming, taking the time out your Wednesdays. Thank you, Desiraé. Thank you. I can't say thank you enough for these opportunities to do that. Before we ask our citizens to get more engaged, we have to give them something to work for. Before we can ask our citizens to trust our leadership, we must be more transparent and capable of follow through. I think about Facebook, and I think about liking, following, poking, and sharing. Those things denote action, and you can do it sitting right on your duff. It's not enough for people to just want to do things passively. I think Ypsilanti, we are a hub between Detroit and Ann Arbor. We are the prime place. If it wasn't so prime, you wouldn't be here. Investors wouldn't be looking here. It's a special place, and I think it's unique in its how it's set up, and I appreciate it more when I come back. I'm here to challenge what the ideas of sustainability is, to identify crucial issues, and some things are a sense of urgency. And again, every person who has an issue, I want to be the voice for some of those folks. We understand that we need more consistent leadership. We need Ypsilanti to be more cooperative and welcoming as a city, and we need not to be afraid to work with people that we like and don't like. As a basketball coach, I've worked and coached people who I just did not really care for. However, at the end of the day, when we hoisting the championship trophy, we know we all had individual work to do and collective work to do, just like as citizens. My name is Anthony Morgan. I work for the Ypsilanti City Schools and Ann Arbor, but I'm asking for your vote November 6th. Thank you.
You had a few words to close? Yeah.
So that was the forum. Thank you to the candidates for participating in tonight's forum. This forum was a partnership between the League of Women Voters of the Ann Arbor area, the Ypsilanti District Library, and the Riverside Arts Center. Thanks to the Riverside Arts Center for hosting and for all the setup. Thank you to Roberta for moderating. Thank you for Teresa for keeping the time. Thank you for Ellie and Sophie for helping with the sign-in sheet and keeping track of numbers. Thank you to Jesse and Rick for helping with sound. Thanks to Ypsi Live for existing so we can... Oh, no problem. And so, let's see. These forums will be rebroadcast on Channel 19 a number of times between now and the election and are available on demand for streaming on your computer or smartphone. Go to our website, lwvannarbor.org, and look for the links to the programs. They're also available on the Ypsi Live Facebook group and on the League of Women Voters of the Ann Arbor area YouTube page. For additional balanced, nonpartisan information on candidates and ballot issues, go to vote411.org and enter your address. There you will find information on the candidates and ballot proposals that will appear on your ballot. And don't forget, there's a What's on Your Ballot session That's going to be on the 11th at the Whitaker Road Library, and the 15th here, and also a school board candidates forum next Wednesday, the 17th. Be sure to vote on November 6th, Tuesday. Have a good night.